now.
Blog Talk Radio.
Alternative facts.
The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. At 12:07 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, numerous unidentified objects of unknown intent and unknown origin were detected at high altitudes over multiple locations of Earth's outer space by the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and these objects are presumed to be some form of controlled aircraft. It is not known if more of these aircraft will arrive, or if they will attempt entering Earth's atmosphere. United States citizens are encouraged to monitor local media outlets, as more updates will follow as information becomes available. The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. Attacks by the undead have been reported in several states across the country. The dead are rising from their graves and are attacking the human race. At this time, it is expected that more attacks of this nature will occur in several other states in the next few hours. The intent behind their attack is unknown at this time. He has been observed that a byte or exchange of fluids is a method of transmission. This is an extremely dangerous situation if they crave the taste of human flesh. It is not known whether this event will last for hours, days, or even longer. Stay calm, as authorities have been dispatched to deal with these creatures. An all-clear siren will be sounded when this situation is under control. Pacific Standard Time, nor is detected a long-range nuclear missile launcher. This missile is believed to be headed in the direction of all residents within a 400-mile radius of this area should seek a fallout shelter immediately.
Welcome to Within the Chaos with your host,
Rodney Shortridge,
and co-host,
Robin Dalton.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. You can listen in by going to blogtalkradio.com/withinthechaos, or listen in by phone. You can dial 323-870-4197. And you can also call in to ask questions to our guests at the same number, 323-870-4197. From deep within the heart of the Appalachians, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you all for listening to Within the Chaos. My name is Rodney Shortridge, and I'll be your host tonight, along with my fiery redhead co-host, Robin Dalton. Sorry about that, everybody. I forgot to turn the damn mic off. But anyway, what I was saying, Robin's no longer Within the Chaos, but Melinda. She's here tonight, and she's going to kind of fill in for me. This past week, I got real bad sick, and I was put in the hospital Sunday, and just got out today. So I'm not 100%. And for any sumbitch that says I'm faking this, I'll be more than happy to see you outside, because I can show you the scars and the bruises and the hell I went through. But with that being said, I hope it's the right number. Let me make sure. Preston, can you send me your area code real quick so I can make sure I'm getting ready to click you on Facebook? I forgot, people. Like I said, I'm not 100%. I'm not on my game, but I was trying.
You got it.
Well, thanks, Preston. Let's see here. Yep, that's him. I was right. So, well, I'm going to go ahead. I ain't going to go through all this, all the commercials and all that. I just ain't into it tonight. But it's my honor to welcome our special guest, Preston Dennett, and I'm handing you over to get hands with Melinda. So you all have fun.
Awesome, thank you.
How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, doing very well. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Come on, girl, get on the ball.
I'm getting on it. So, Preston, can you tell everybody a little bit about yourself? What started you in researching UFO and paranormal phenomenon?
Yeah, sure, I'd be happy to. I was skeptical, actually. Growing up, I was skeptical of UFOs and really anything paranormal. And I thought everyone in my family was. It turns out they weren't. They were keeping secrets from me. Didn't know it, but several members in my family had a number of paranormal experiences and UFO encounters. My friends as well, people at work that I'd worked with for years, were all keeping secrets from me. And how it actually came down was, I remember this vividly. Let me see, it was November 1986. Just watching the news, the whole family was there. And this, Tom Brokaw or Dan Rather, one of these main news guys, comes on the TV and starts talking about this pilot over Alaska who had seen a UFO. And they kind of just joked about it and giggled and laughed nervously and moved on. But I later found out it was a huge sighting. This very large object tracked this Japanese commercial airliner for about an hour, for I believe it was almost 100 miles. It appeared on their onboard radar. It appeared on the FAA radar. They later denied it and called it a split image. But it's a great case, and I remember hearing this pilot and thinking to myself, well, he's got to be lying. He must be lying. There's no way he's seeing a spaceship. I'd never, been taught this in school. No one, I thought, took this at all seriously. And I thought, well, if he's not lying, he's on drugs, or he's just flat out misperceiving. And I started talking about it. And this is kind of how I took a left turn right into the Twilight Zone and found out that my brother had seen a UFO. He had 2 witnesses with him, by the way. I ended up interviewing all of them. My sister-in-law, she saw this bright UFO hovering over Van Nuys Air Force Reserve Base here in the San Fernando Valley in Southern California. Again, she had 2 witnesses. And found out a lot of people I knew had seen UFOs. I had a friend who saw a UFO with another witness. They had apparently missing time. I brought it up at work to this lady I worked with for years and years. And she's like, oh, yeah, me and my whole family saw a UFO up in the mountains, in the San Gabriel Mountains. She said it was darting around. It was this star-like object moving at right angles. And I'm like, wow, I knew she wasn't lying. And this started to really hit home. As this lady, I'll call her Diane, is describing her sighting, in walks Dorothy. And Dorothy's, another really nice lady. I've known her for years and years. She says, oh, UFOs? Yeah, I saw one. Me and my best friend and my mom. And she told me this really amazing story about how she had walked out of the library right when it closed at 9 o'clock. This was in Koreatown in Southern California. And they were going to smoke a cigarette before their mom picked them up. So they actually exited the library at like 5 minutes to 9 and were smoking a cigarette when this star-like object comes swooping down and hovers across the street. And they both said it was silver, saucer-shaped, had colored lights around it, was totally silent. And the mom pulls up, she sees it, and they all rush into the car and they race home. Now, they live 5 minutes away from the library, and this object is following them right above their car. And they're all excited. They rush to their house. They run inside. They go to the second story, look out the window, and they can still see it. It darts a couple of times and then takes off. And they turn to the clock, and it's 10:15. And Dorothy says, oh, my God, to her best friend, Carol, you've got to go home. They could not understand what had happened to about an hour of time. So, yeah, it hit home for me. It was not good news. I have to tell you, I was really upset.
So, what type of UFOs have you witnessed?
I never witnessed anything until I started researching this stuff, and it was about, a couple of months after I started, attending lectures and reading books and all of this that I saw my first UFO. It was actually in a really unlikely place. I went to downtown Santa Monica. This is, right by the La Brea Tar Pits, the George Page Museum. It's a very crowded urban area. And there was a UFO speaker, Andy Rice was his name. And he was a contactee. And he was describing all his encounters, and he's like, yeah, I'm in contact with them telepathically. And in fact, after this lecture, if anyone wants to go outside with me, I'm going to try and call down a UFO. And there were like 50 people at that meeting, maybe 100, a lot. And the meeting ends, and he goes out, and maybe about 10 or 20 of us go out, follow him to see if he can call down a UFO. I was really surprised. I thought everyone would want to see one, but they did not take him seriously, I guess. And so he takes us to the park across the street, and you can't even see a single star in the sky. It's very bright. It's nighttime, but no stars are visible because of the light pollution. And he gets us all in kind of a circle, and he says, okay, let's hold hands and meditate. I'm like, no, I didn't want to. That's not what I signed up for. I was not really into meditating at that time. But, I thought, okay, fine, I'm here, I'll do it. And we all just kind of stood there for a minute, cleared our thoughts. And he says, okay, open your eyes and look to the south here. And he points up to the sky and says, look right there. Keep looking, keep looking, keep looking. And boom, this bright light flashes down. And I have to tell you, Melinda, it looked like a shooting star. It really did, but I was impressed because he pointed right to where it was about to appear.
Right.
And there it was. Right? That's weird. And I thought, okay, and that was kind of the first time I thought, well, I can't quite explain that. Could be a shooting star, but I don't think so because he pointed to where it was.
Right.
And since then, I'm going to say I've had similar sightings to that once every couple of years. The next one was one of my best. I'm driving home one evening after talking about UFOs with my sister-in-law and my brother. By this point, I was crazy out of my mind with this subject. I had bought every book. I was tromping around through the fields. I was interviewing people. I was joining all the UFO groups. I wanted to find out what was going on. And I'm driving home through Woodland Hills, very densely populated suburban area. It was, 10 o'clock at night, late July, around early 1990s, maybe 90, 91, 92. And, actually it would have to be at least 1991, because I was living in my condo in Canoga Park, and that's where I was heading. So I'm driving I no sooner left their house and was driving down this little street and about to hit, the main street, Canoga, when this little, I thought it was a bird at first, but I saw instantly it wasn't. It was a round ball of light. I'm thinking, okay, it's a golf ball and it's coming towards me, and it swooped down and came right in front of my windshield and stopped. I'm going to say about a foot in front, maybe two, right there, about as big as a golf ball, sort of the soft white light, but very solid looking. And it darted from side to side, right in front of my windshield, like twice, maybe three times. Moves forward, dips down a little bit, and goes straight up to the trees. And I thought, oh my God, what was that? And it kind of left my mind. I didn't talk about it. I didn't tell anyone. It took me a couple of years before I thought, hey, I remember that. I almost forgot about it. And this is something I've read from other witnesses. They'll have a sighting, and they don't talk about it. It leaves their mind. So that's kind of what happened to me. And yeah, regularly after then, I've had some really amazing sightings. A couple where I felt like I've had telepathic contact. A couple of metallic-looking ships, not just lights. Possible entity sightings on a couple of occasions. Not quite enough to say for sure. Certainly nothing like the people I've interviewed. But yeah, I've been seeing them pretty regularly. I'm almost positive that they are aware of me on some level, and the fact that I'm researching them.
Right. And I read where you've got 30 plus years dealing with UFO research and 21 books, 100 articles, and your first book, UFO Healings. And can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that covers 100 cases of people who have had a physiological improvement as a result of a UFO encounter. And by that, I mean maybe cured of a cut or a flesh wound or a cold even, infections, headaches, or more serious conditions, maybe like tuberculosis or diphtheria or diabetes, all the way up, to cancer and even AIDS. There's one case of AIDS. In fact, that book was my first book, published in 1996, and I'm putting together another edition because there was 103 cases in that book, and I think by now I've collected well over twice that, probably closer to 250. And when I first was looking into that, I thought, I'm going to write an article about UFO healings. I'd written a bunch of articles to this point. I hadn't written any books, but I was gearing up to. And I started researching these healing cases. There was a really well-known case of a police officer who had been bitten on his finger by his son's pet baby alligator and left a wound on his finger. It was swollen. It was, painful. And he's a police officer, Deputy Robert Good, and he's with another officer, McCoy is his name, and they're driving along because they were called actually to a UFO sighting, and drove out to the area, and there it was, this giant 50-foot long metallic-looking craft hovering very low, maybe a couple of 100 feet up, and it sends down this purple beam of light. hits the officer on the hand, Robert Good, and he can feel it. He says he could feel this beam of light. It was kind of warm and tingling. And they're scared, very scared. They take off, driving really fast, and as soon as they're out of sight of this object, they pull into a diner and go inside to talk about what they'd seen, and that's when he noticed his finger wasn't hurting, pulls off the bandage, and there is no cut. It's gone. It's cured. Much like, you'd see in Star Trek or something. It's just gone. And there's a number of cases, a lot of cases like this. There was a doctor in France who was struck by a beam of light, a medical doctor.
Right.
He was cured of an axe wound on his foot. And he also was partially paralyzed from earlier war injuries in the Algerian War. And after this beam of light strikes him, his paralysis goes away. He's able to play piano again professionally as he did before. So there was a couple of cases. A Peruvian customs official, he was struck by a beam of light, cured him of nearsightedness and rheumatism, 2 cures. And I thought, okay, I'm going to survey the literature. I'm going to see how many cases there are. This would be a great article. I haven't heard a lot about this. There was a man in Brazil who was struck by a beam of light, grew a new set of teeth. There was another South American case, I believe it was also Brazil, involving a young girl who was cured of cancer. So I'm putting all these cases together, and I kept finding more and more. And I just kind of did a brief survey of the literature, and I found 40 cases. So I thought, oh my God, this is not going to fit into an article. Maybe I should research this more. It would make a great book. So that's basically what I did. I found 103 cases total, and changed the way I viewed this phenomena. At the time, I was very upset about the whole abduction scenario, people being taken against their will. I thought it was pretty horrific and really had very little benefit for humanity, or certainly the so-called victims. And I started to shift a little bit because there were a lot of healing cases, and in some of these cases, people felt absolutely that these ETs were their friends. And, I know there are injury cases as well, quite a number of them. People have been struck by a beam of light and suffer perhaps radiation sickness or eye irritation or a number of things. A lot of these seem to be accidental. People get too close to the UFO or they stare into it for too long, whereas these healing cases seem to be intentionally done on the part of the ETs. And I started to see a real, positive side to this phenomena. And, I kind of began to realize that if you study these abduction accounts, there is a very, very strong medical theme that runs through them. It's very predominant. And I sort of began to look at these UFOs as like floating hospitals more than anything else. And boy, I've been looking into this lately. I've been interviewing people all across the world, in France and England, all over the place, Australia, Canada. And it's a worldwide phenomenon. A lot of people are being healed. A lot more, I think, than even the UFO community realizes. So, it's an extraordinary aspect, I think, of UFO contact that's been largely overlooked.
Now, I read where you said there was 4 major categories. Can you elaborate on that?
4 major categories.
About the healing, like the beam of light was one of them.
Oh yeah, the different ways people are healed.
Yes.
The healings occur in a wide variety of actual scenarios. By far, the most common is being struck by a beam of light, or healings involving a beam of light of some kind. And there's something about these beams of light that they have an understanding that's far, far better than our own. And we're starting to use lights to heal people. But no, they're way, way ahead of us. And that is the biggest category. Another category that really, really surprised me is that a number of these healings actually occur within a hospital. That really surprised me. It's like 9 or 10% of people who claim to have had a healing talk about how they were in a hospital when suddenly a strange figure appears. Sometimes it's human-looking. Sometimes it's your typical gray type ET. There's one I just uncovered involving a praying mantis, involving a lady who was cured of or healed of a head injury. So yeah, hospitals, that's another category for sure. Some people have bedroom visitations. They're actually visited in their bedroom, sort of like a house visit. The biggest category of where people are healed is within the UFO itself, and they undergo a typical operation, very much described as, how we do cures, involving, not so much scalpels, but lasers, usually, to open up the body and remove, perhaps, say, cancerous material. So that's pretty common. But there's another category, and that's just people who are in the vicinity of a UFO. There's one guy who was being rushed to the hospital for kidney stones, and this UFO appears and starts circling around the car, and his pain started to go away. By the time it circled the car 10, 20 times, and his pain went away, and they continued to the hospital, and they could not find any kidney stones. He had been previously diagnosed and was being treated for them, but they were gone. A bunch of cases of healings of kidney stones, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's hard to make sense of these, but there are definite patterns.
Why do you think they want to heal our bodies or are interested in healing us?
I think there's various reasons. That's the million-dollar question, and you're asking me to speculate, so I don't know. But I have noticed the patterns. It's pretty equally divided between men and women, maybe a few more men, but not a whole lot. And a lot of people who are having contact already, who have reported encounters since childhood onward, they're much more likely to be healed than the average person. That's definitely a pattern. But it's not always there. A good third of the cases, people have never seen a UFO before or since. And some people are not, contactees or abductees. They are friends with one, like that guy who was cured of kidney stones. He was actually friends with a contactee who was in the car at the time. So that's one, I think, reason why some people are being healed. And I've looked into it, and one pattern I found that was really interesting, and it keeps turning up. I thought it was a pretty loose pattern at first, but I'm beginning to think it's actually a pretty solid pattern here, corroboration. And that is people who are doing good work for humanity in some way. And by that I would mean I'll just give you some examples. John Hunter Gray, award-winning social worker for many, many years, he was healed. An inventor in England, he was healed. A doctor in France, he was healed. Environmentalist in Norway, she described the healing of her back. Human rights activists, animal rights activists, dancers, actors, police officers. These are the type of people who are being healed. So I think what's happening here is that ETs are helping us in a limited way without actually landing and handing us the answers. They're helping people out who are helping humanity in whatever way they can. Lots of doctors and healers and teachers and professors and writers even, this sort of thing are the people who are being healed. And another pattern, I'll just stick this in here, it's kind of a tangent, but who's doing the healing? I was always kind of interested in that because I think a lot of people think, it's the contactee eras, the human-looking aliens, the friendly space brothers, the Nordics, often they're called. And yes, there's a number of healings coming from the human-looking ETs, but there are actually more people being healed by gray-type ETs than human-looking. There are healings by praying mantis. When I first did the first book, I had no reptilian healings, or very few. That's not the case anymore. There's a number of them. So these healings are coming from a wide variety of reported ETs and being, given to all kinds of people, children, even people who are, in their golden years or older, report healings. One lady, she was pretty elderly, and she was cured of jaundice, that the doctors were having real struggles, trying to cure her. So, yeah, all kinds of people are being healed.
You hear the stories about people who, have been abducted and they've been probed and tests ran on them and stuff of that nature. Why do you think the aliens are so interested in our bodies, the makeup of our bodies, especially the females?
Yes, it's a pretty strong theme, isn't it? They're interested in all things human. They are obsessed with humans. I don't know what's going on, but we seem to be the focus of an enormous amount of attention. And the human body does seem to be one of their main agendas in terms of, studying and figuring out. There was a study by Thomas Bullard, a folklorist and UFO researcher, pioneering researcher, who did a study of well over 300 cases. And he found that the physical examination was the one detail that varied the least. And I have to say that's true in my own research as well. So yes, they are very interested in us, particularly the grays. The examination occurs, I don't want to say without fail, without exception, but quite a bit. And I think the reason is because of one of their agendas. Heard it from the very beginning when I started doing this research, well before it was well known, that there's a genetic component to this, that ETs are apparently taking genetic material from both men and women in order to produce what appears to be hybrid babies. And I know how this sounds to a skeptic, but you're kind of stuck with the stories when one person reports it and then another, and they don't know each other, and they've not read any UFO books. And at that time, there really was nothing written about this. And I was like floored when I started getting all these cases. And then Bud Hopkins, leading UFO researcher, now deceased, really nice guy, I've met him a number of times. He came out with his books, Missing Time and Intruders, which really outlined this theory that ETs are hybridizing using human genes. And I think this is the main reason why they're so interested in human bodies, is because, in essence, they are human. The Greys have, I'm speculating here, human genetics within them. They look very much like us. There are ETs that look just like us, as I've mentioned, which to me raises serious questions about human origins and who we are in our relationship to these guys. And if the Greys are able to hybridize with us, what does that say about our relationship with them? And people have asked the Greys, and the Greys have flat out said, "Oh, you are us. We are you. We are you from the future. We used to look just like you. Or one day you will look like us." I wrote about this in one of my books, Not From Here. What exactly is our relationship with the ETs? And I think it's a lot closer than people realize. I am guessing that there is some very close genetic relationship there, or similarity at the very least. and they know more about the human body than we do, which is incredible to me. But that's evidenced by the fact that people are taken on board and cured of all manners of chronic diseases. It's not at all uncommon for someone to be being examined, and ET will put an instrument on them, and suddenly they can see the inside of their body in full living color on this sort of holographic screen right beside them. A number of people have been taken on board, and suddenly they're being examined, and boom, they can see all their guts and organs, and they promptly vomit. They're like, oh, no, this is too much. But yeah, their technology is outstanding. They're very interested in the human body, and I think it's because they are genetically harvesting our genetic material and creating a hybrid race, because they have done too much cloning and have lost the ability to reproduce. This comes up, I mean, I say this because it's not just one case or two cases or even 5 or 10. It's a number of cases where people have gotten this story from the Greys, that their race is dying and they're trying to strengthen it. They're very interested in human emotions. They're very interested in all things human, really. But that is their main agendas, is reproducing or using our genetic material to help their race.
Do you think that we're in danger of them creating this race and possibly, coming here and trying to rid us?
No. This is a theory of some UFO researchers, that this whole phenomena is not good news for humanity, and I disagree. I don't think there's any evidence of hostility or any evidence of sadism or any evidence of them wanting to take over. I think that they've probably been genetically altering humanity for thousands of years. I think that's what the evidence is actually showing us, and not just from an angle of a UFO angle, but if you look at ancient writings, if you look at the myths in various cultures, and if you look at it from a scientific anthropological standpoint. I took a lot of anthropology classes, and human origins is a huge mystery. They don't know quite what happened. They don't know how we managed to sort of evolve into such an intelligent, Homo sapiens so quickly. Could very well be there's some genetic tampering going on, and my guess is, that's this. What we're seeing now is part of a 1,000-year-long continuum, and I don't think it's something we have to be worried about. I think all the evidence shows that when someone is taken on board, they're given various messages, and they're all really positive. Overall, the phenomena, I don't think, is displaying any hostility or tendency towards taking over the planet. I'm guessing we're just going to be changed more and more as time goes on, altered by these guys who have already been doing it for a very, very, very long time. And the way I see it, their ultimate agenda is, enlightening us. They're trying to get us more psychic, trying to get us to use less fossil fuels, stop destroying the planet, and this sort of thing. The messages that they're saying, what they're telling people is very positive. So no, I'm not worried about it. I think we're trending towards open official contact. I think probably that will happen at some point. I don't know if it's going to happen tomorrow or 50 years or maybe 200, but it's coming, I think, and along with disclosure. So I'm hopeful. I think it's good news, and I'm not afraid of UFOs. I don't think they're demonic or anything like that. I have to tell you, Melinda, I looked into the whole demonic phenomena, ghosts and all of that, studied it very deeply, because I was concerned. I didn't want to be hoodwinked. No, doesn't explain what's happening at all. Overall, I do know that people have negative experiences. There are people who come away from their encounters medically damaged in some respect, and there are a number of people, though, who come away cured, healed. So what we're looking at, I think, is sort of a bell curve of behavior that falls under the same umbrella as human behavior. They're very much like us. They're doing the same things we would do if we were visiting another planet, except it's skewed towards the positive. Like I said, we don't have hardly any accounts of what I would call sadistic behavior, or Nazi-like torture, or them getting pleasure out of hurting someone. That's pretty much absent. Not totally, but just about, from onboard UFO accounts and face-to-face encounters. So I'm very hopeful, and I'm really excited. I think we're living in an amazing time, and we're about to be welcomed into a sort of a new era, a galactic community. It's going to be amazing.
So, do you think, like, if, for instance, with the whole Russia thing that's going on, there's fear that, we might bomb each other. Do you think that if they knew that was about to happen, that they might intervene? You think that's possible?
Absolutely, it's possible. I wouldn't count on it, because if you look through the history of humanity, we don't see a lot of that. They, didn't stop the Hiroshima bombs.
Right.
They didn't stop Fukushima, though
Right.
there was some interesting footage that came out over Fukushima. But, I'm not going to count it out, because there's a number of cases where people have said, or the ETs have told them, that they would intervene, or that they have intervened in the past, but just aren't advertising it. They don't tell people, oh, we saved your lives. They just do it on the down low. And I did interview one lady. Boy, oh my gosh, this one lady. It's an amazing case. She lives in, the Midwest, and I interviewed her for hours and hours. She wrote a bunch of stuff down as well, which I reviewed. She had a lifelong encounters, lots and lots of encounters. She'd often wake up, she'd be inside a UFO, she'd be examined, things like this. She'd see other people. She saw various types of ETs. Well, one evening she wakes up, she's inside this UFO, and it's huge. There's different types of ETs, there's different types of Earth people there, and she's in this kind of weird, not unconscious or hypnotic state, but semi-conscious. It's slightly different than the normal waking state. She had trouble describing it, but it left her very pliable and very compliant to whatever these ETs wanted her to do. They'd say, do this, and she'd do it. And she was inside this giant 2-story UFO, had windows going all around it. She looks out one of the windows, and she sees this sort of jungle area. She's thinking, gosh, this looks like, I don't know, a jungle in South America or something. And this volcano explodes and sends this pyroclastic flow, just these mud flows down these valleys, and before it hits, this UFO lands and starts scooping up people out of this little village, out of a number of villages. And she helped the ETs bring people on board the UFO. And everyone was very compliant. They have this ability to make people do what they want them to do. There was another UFO nearby also scooping up people. And after they scooped up, a couple of hundred at least, this volcano explodes, mud flows are going by, and they're still rescuing people. They're still pulling people out of the mud, and goes on for hours. And that at some point, her memory blacks out, and she wakes up, and it's the next morning. She's like, wow, that was different. I haven't had one quite like that. Was that a dream? I don't think it was a dream, because these experiences are different from dreams. They're much more vivid. They're much more coherent. And she doesn't know what to think of this until she turns on the news, and there's the volcano. It's exploding in Colombia, I believe. I actually have the book. I'm a huge natural disaster freak. I just read all the books on natural disasters, shipwrecks, anything, floods, tornadoes, earthquakes.
Right.
I've been obsessed with it since I was a little kid, and it kind of fits into this whole thing with the ET phenomena, because they're constantly warning people about disasters. And in this case, actually rescued him. And she's freaking out because here's this volcano. It's exactly what she saw. And I'm talking to her. I'm like, gosh, that sounds like the volcano I'm got a book on. Well, and I get it, and sure enough, I have the actual book on this volcanic eruption. It's a very well-known eruption. Killed a lot of people, buried entire villages, and they were never able to recover a lot of the bodies because they were just buried under hundreds and hundreds of feet of this mud. And, I don't think these people were ever returned. I don't know. I'm guessing not, because how would you, come back from something like that? They would have to erase their memories, which I suppose they could do, but then where would you live? If your
Right.
home is gone, your entire village. So, yeah, I think there is some chance that they will save people from disasters, but I wouldn't count on it. I think that their policy is largely laissez-faire. They're going to stand back and let us make our own mistakes short of blowing up the entire planet, which, God, we're heading towards, it seems like sometimes.
It really does.
Right. But, yeah, I'm hopeful. I'm thinking, I'm not sure if they're going to rescue us if, the missiles start flying, but they might. I'm hoping they do.
So, tell us your opinion about the alien implants.
Gosh, I know quite a bit about this. There's a doctor, Dr. Roger Lear. He's now deceased. He passed away a couple of years ago. He was the expert on the subject, one of them. He was a foot doctor, a podiatrist, who had a patient who had one of these implants, and he actually removed it. And he started to specialize in this and removed a bunch of them. I knew him pretty well. I've spoken for his group. He was a really nice guy. And I started to interview more and more people who had alien implants. They would go to the doctor, and the doctors would be like, you have this weird thing in your sinus. Or did you have sinus surgery at some point? And they'd be like, no, what's there? Oh, it's a metallic object. One guy interviewed, he had a lifetime of experiences. He was a medical expert, a nurse, practitioner, and was able to pull some strings and get X-rays and MRIs. X-rays didn't show anything, but the MRIs showed he had number of objects in his body, a couple in his brain, like his pituitary and in various kind of strategic locations. So, yeah, I've talked to a lot of people who've had this experience. I've talked to people who've had their implants removed. And the work of Dr. Roger Lear shows that these objects are unusual. They're sometimes organic, and they sort of decay immediately. Some are clearly metallic. They've been analyzed and shown to be very similar in composition to meteoritic iron, of all things. How someone could get a meteor inside their body is, impossible. So, this is great evidence. There's no foreign body reaction. There's all kinds of unusual properties. A lot of these implants look very much the same, kind of like a cantaloupe seed or a little metallic burr, a BB type thing. Some of these objects are magnetic and will move around in the body by themselves. There's a couple that were actually emitting some sort of electromagnetic signal that could be picked up on an EM detector. I was contacted by one lady because her son went to the dentist, and the dentist freaked out because there's this large metallic sphere under his molar in the back of his mouth. And they're like, well, did you get shot in the face with a BB gun? And he's like, no. And his mom's like, no, we would remember that. And besides, this object has no entry wound, and it's larger than a BB. And it's directly under the tooth. There's no way it could be there. And it did not show up in previous dental x-rays. So, he's like 15, it's not there. 16, he saw a UFO real close up, goes back to the dentist, and it's there. And they went back to the dentist a year later, and it was still there. On one time, they took an X-ray, and it was there. They took a second X-ray, it was gone. They took a third X-ray, it was back. And that was over a period of 5 minutes. So this thing was either disappearing or moving around or God knows what. But she sent me the X-rays. I sent them to an oral surgeon. I sent them to an emergency room doctor. A number of people who are medical professionals. I have a little bit of a medical background myself, not a doctor by any means, but I've been certainly educating myself on all of this for years. And they all diagnosed it as a foreign body. So my point is, a lot of people have these. If someone's being taken on board, the chances are very likely, or good, certainly much better, that they have some sort of implant like these. And the question, the $1 million question, obviously, is what are they for? And it's always been pure speculation, really. No one really knows. A lot of people have speculated they're used for perhaps mind control, because some abductees can't remember a lot of their experiences. They have missing time, or they're suddenly overcome with an impulse to drive out of their home, and that's when they're abducted. Others think they're tracking devices. I disagree. I've now talked to a number of people, a good half dozen, and I've read another half dozen cases that support this, that the purpose for the implants is to measure or monitor the vital signs of the human body. It's either to monitor your health, to monitor your vital signs, to measure the level of pollution in your body, or to boost the immune system. All these are the different kinds of answers I'm getting from people who've asked the ETs flat out, what's the deal with this implant? Or ask them, what is this implant for? And the ETs said that. It's to boost your immune system. It's to measure the level of pollution. It's so that we can monitor your health and we will know how you're doing. So I think that's a very positive point towards these implants that's not very well publicized. And just to close off this, or cap it off, put the nail in the coffin, so to speak.
Right.
There was, you've heard of Area 51 in Nevada?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
This is where we're supposedly reverse engineering UFOs and possibly work directly with aliens. In fact, that's what the reports are saying. Well, Fate magazine did this study where they decided to ask their readers to visit Area 51 psychically using remote viewing or psychic impressions or out-of-body exploring or whatever they could. And about a dozen or so people responded, all women, by the way, not one man. I found that kind of interesting. And they proceeded to give their impressions. And what they saw was very much what researchers had previously discovered through interviewing witnesses, insiders, that were basically reverse engineering or working on genetic things and working on biological weapons and various things like this. But 4 of the people who responded to this survey said something I'd never heard from any other researcher. And they all said the same thing, that the people who are working at Area 51 have been implanted by the ETs with implants that not only boost their health, but make them so they don't get sick and live much longer, to the point where they're almost not even human. They're altered in such a way that their health is unbelievably strengthened. And 4 of them said that. I'm like, wow. So I think there are good reasons for these implants. There's a guy in England, Jason Andrews, who says, you'll never take my implant out, not in a million years. I love my implant. He's all about his contacts. He's worked very hard to get through the fear and have open official contact without fear. I think the implants are not bad news. I think they're absolutely real. They're smoking gun evidence. I've seen implants with my own eyes. I held them in my hands. I've read the studies. It's very impressive stuff, and I don't think we've seen the last of it.
Okay. I read an article at the end of last year. It was talking about the Defense Department budget. It had a $600 billion budget, and $22 million of that was spent on the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. That was the first time really that the Defense Department had actually acknowledged the existence of the program. What is your opinion about it? With them finally, actually putting money towards it and acknowledging that they are. Is it maybe because there's more fighting? You can't deny it anymore, or what is your theory on that?
Yeah, I think this is part of the disclosure movement. There's enormous pressure from all sides to disclose, for the government to tell us what they know about these crashed saucers, the alien technology they have, the free energy, so to speak. An enormous amount of pressure from, the ETs themselves, I think, from within the cover-up, from the UFO community, from witnesses. It's definitely trending towards that. There was a recent disclosure statement by the Pentagon employees, or former employees of the Pentagon, or the Pentagon itself. I'm not entirely clear on this, but they said flat out, yeah, UFOs are real. Here's footage of one, and we're officially aren't investigating this. If you were to contact the Air Force, like, no, we're not. Look, UFOs aren't real. We've already determined that years ago with Project Blue Book. And no matter where you go, trying to contact the government, they're like, no, not real. No threat to national security. We're not looking into it. That's a lie. We know that's a lie. We've actually, through the Freedom of Information Act, have had to sue the government. The Citizens Against UFO Secrecy was very successful in this regard. John Greenwald is a California-based researcher who has done a number of FOIA requests and gotten all kinds of information. And what it's shown is that the NSA, the CIA, the FBI, the Air Force, the Navy, all the intelligence organizations, all the military organizations take this subject extremely seriously at the very highest levels. That's not to say the lower levels don't take it seriously, but they don't for the most part. But the generals, the four-star generals, the Navy commanders, they know this is real. Presidents are apparently informed of this. Some senators within the intelligence community apparently know all about this. And this whole black budget, a lot of this money is being pushed towards this subject, I think. I really do. So officially, we're not looking into it. We're not spending money. But, yeah, actually we are. A lot of our defense budget is going towards this subject. It's still a huge hot potato. It is the number one subject, I think, within the upper echelons of the military. I think they're very, very concerned about it, as evidenced by the UFO behavior where they hover over our nuclear power stations, where they hover over our nuclear missile silos and shut them off one by one, which they've done on more than one occasion. From a military standpoint, yeah, I think they have a lot of concern, and they're very much throwing all kinds of attention to this. But officially, no. And so this is where the whole schizophrenic and the disconnect is. This cover-up is crumbling. It can't go on. There's not millions, but an enormous number of whistleblowers coming out of the woodwork right now. I've talked to a number of Navy people, pretty high level in some cases, who want their story told, or government contractors and things like this. pretty much every major UFO researcher worth their salt has, also uncovered cases involving whistleblowers. So this cover-up is coming to a point. It's, I think this is really the front lines of UFO research right now. And I'm very interested to see what happens. Are there going to be further disclosures? I think there will be. Are they going to release the technology? Yes, eventually I think they are. If you believe Colonel Corso and a number of other people, some of the technology we already have has been back-engineered from ETs. So I would love it if we would officially take the subject more seriously, teach it in schools, start putting up UFO surveillance towers or official UFO organizations. At this point, we don't have any that are public. But yeah, unofficially, you bet we're looking into this. The NSA, the Air Technical Intelligence Command, all of them are looking deep into it and spending a lot of money towards this.
Something that's always, made me very curious, with the aliens, their technology being, so far surpassed us. Why they would crash? Why would their spaceship crash?
Yeah, that is a great question. And UFO crashes is a subject.
Yes, it's not like they're running out of gas or anything,
Yeah, they do seem to have this amazing technology. How is it they could possibly crash if they can hypnotize people and take you from any place, and heal people and travel faster than light? It doesn't make sense. But this is kind of what we're stuck with. UFO crashes back in the day, in the early days of UFO research, 50s, 60s, and 1970s, were not accepted. There was no research into it at all. The first guy was Frank Scully. He put out a book called Behind the Flying Saucers, which outlined this UFO crash in New Mexico and a couple of others. And no one took him seriously, even though the intelligence community contacted him and said, "Oh, boy, your book caused this enormous number of problems." And later, after the Roswell crash busted wide open, the Roswell crash in New Mexico, through the work of William Moore and Stanton Friedman and others, Kevin Randall, Don Schmidt, people started to take UFO crashes more seriously. But even then, they thought it was an isolated event. But it turns out it's not so isolated. People think of UFO crashes, they think of Roswell. They think maybe of the Aztec crash in New Mexico, or Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, maybe that one in Arizona, the Paradise Valley crash, the Aurora crash. There's a bunch more, and now we're finding this out. There are crashes in every state. I wrote a book called UFOs over California, named for Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, New York, and New Mexico. And every one of these states, Melinda, has a UFO crash in it. So it does occur. There's hundreds of these cases. And why they're crashing is because their technology is not flawless.
Right.
They do have vulnerabilities. The Roswell crash apparently occurred during a lightning storm. Also, there's been some research pointing towards the possibility that our radar affected their navigational instrumentation negatively, causing them to crash. And we started to use it as a weapon to bring these things down. New Mexico has an enormous number of UFO crashes compared to other states. But yeah, they all do. And there's some evidence that we're actually purposefully shooting these things down using particle beam weaponry, some of which we've apparently taken from the UFOs themselves. So some of them might not be accident crashes as we think of it. They might be shot down. Some are definitely crashes.
That's what you're saying. us interfering with them.
Yeah. So I think, some so-called crashes are not accident.
Okay.
And some are. I think that what we have is a situation where there's a lot more UFOs flying around than people realize. Right now, as we're talking, there is someone being abducted. Right now. There are many, many people right at this very moment on our planet seeing UFOs. The Mutual UFO Network and the National UFO Reporting Center receive dozens of reports on a daily basis. Daily. And only 1 in 100 people, if that, report their sighting. So we're looking at hundreds and hundreds of people seeing UFOs every day. So it's no wonder that some of these are going to crash. It's very rare, but I think it does happen.
Right. Now, you mentioned one of your books, UFO over California, and you were talking about undersea UFO bases. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, this is actually, I wrote a chapter in my book, UFOs over California, about UFOs in the ocean. And I was going to publicize it by, publicize the book by excerpting that chapter because I'd gotten some additional cases. And as I'm looking into it, I've started to get more. So I wrote this article for Fate magazine, and I titled it, "Is There an Undersea Base Off the California Coast?" And I put together a pretty compelling case, I think. And you're kind of scooping me here because this is the subject of my next book. I've gotten so much more information on this about undersea UFO activity off the coast here and the evidence pointing towards the possibility of a base. And what we're looking at is probably close to 100 cases of these objects coming in and out of the water. That's the first data point, I think, that points towards a base. The second would be not just 1 or 2 objects. It's very rare for someone to see, say, a fleet of UFOs. Not unheard of. People will see 4 or 5 UFOs, but anything more than a dozen is pretty rare. There are 10, 20 cases where people have seen these UFO fleets in this area, and some of them involve 200-300 UFOs. And in those particular cases, so that's another data point, too many UFOs. But in these cases, they're not coming from above. They're coming from below, coming from the water. So where are all these coming from? If there's not a base down there, there's a parking lot of these things. And there are a few abduction cases in this area where people were taken not into a UFO, they were taken to what appears to be an underground base. So yeah, I think that there probably is something down there. And it wasn't until just recently, really, a couple of years ago, that these Google images came out all over the internet due to some researchers like Robert Stanley and Jimmy Church, who have put out these enhanced images showing this appears to be an artificial structure. So people have debunked it. Some people think it's absolutely real, but I can tell you it's right in the center of where all this activity is occurring. So yeah, I think there's something to that, and I think there's evidence of underground bases, perhaps at Mount Shasta. Puerto Rico has had a lot of this ocean-going UFO activity. There are other areas that have been pointed towards, Florida. There's a case where a guy was taken to sort of undersea base. So yeah, I think they've got bases probably not only on our planet, but on the moon, I'm guessing. A number of reports have come out of that, and in other areas.
Okay, I wanted to touch on the alien autopsy. A lot of people said that they think it was a hoax. Do you believe it was a hoax? And,
this is.
And if so, what was the purpose of doing the hoax?
Right. Well, there's a number of different theories on this. I think most researchers have panned it, debunked it, saying, no, it's not real. Some stick by their guns and say, no, this was actually true alien autopsy. I think one scenario is it is true, and it was sort of a disclosure moment in our society, which was probably not planned by the people who are covering this up. It came out anyway. Another is it's a complete hoax, and that it was done for money. And a third theory is that it's disinformation, partially real, but just riddled with false information to make it look like a hoax. I don't know. This is kind of like, a murder case, a controversial murder case. You can present all the evidence, and you still don't know the answer. You can only come up with a reasonable possibility. And I think there is a reasonable possibility that this is true. There's a number of people who are interviewed who are within the film industry. And, my family is in the film industry. My dad was a production manager. My brother worked in films. My other brother, he was a sound guy. My brother-in-law, he was did lights. So I do have some familiarity, with this sort of thing, and was able to consult with people what they thought. And a number of them said, "Oh gosh, if this is fake, it cost an awful lot of money. It cost a lot of money to do this, and it looks real. Parts of it are pretty impressive. So I'm kind of on the fence, leaning towards the sort of disinformation ploy that it's partially real but not entirely. I just don't know. I do know that there's footage like this out there, and whoever put this together was pretty serious about it, because it's, and I don't know how many people have seen this alien autopsy, but it's not just the autopsy. At the very end, they show some of the wreckage, and it really very much sort of coincides with what eyewitnesses have said. It's like very light, almost like balsa wood metal, very light, and can't be dented. And so there was some of that in that alien autopsy video, which people never talk about. And I wonder about that too. So I think it could very well be real. I really do. And I think that at some point we're going to see something very much like it that is real.
Okay. Within your research, have you dealt with any crop circles? And if so, what is your opinion on them?
I'm not a crop circle expert. I've run across it a few times. Never went to England and visited the crop circles, but I'm pretty close to Barbara Lamb, who is absolutely one of the world's leading crop circle researchers. She wrote a book about it, and I've looked into it quite a bit. It is real. It's not Doug and Dave, two guys from England who claim to have produced all the crop circles in the world. No, it's not them. In fact, scientifically, we can prove that these are real through the research of Dr. Levengood and others who actually studied these wheat stalks or whatever crop had been crushed and showed that it had been exposed to a type of microwave-like radiation, because they could see the nodes in these plants, the cells themselves, had burst. They were exposed to some sort of radiation. You can't fake that by stepping on it. And furthermore, when you see these crop circles, you can tell the fake ones from the good ones if you study it very carefully, because the stalks are interwoven in a way. They're laid incredibly flat, and they're super intricate. And it wasn't long before people, the first crop circles were pretty simple, round circles, but they got more and more and more complicated till there was showing scientific theorems, mathematical theorems were appearing in these crops. The Mandelbrot set is often pointed to. All kinds of really interesting symbolism has taken place, and some people have gotten pretty far in sort of translating what some of these crop circles might be saying. I don't know what to make of it, because it doesn't have a super strong UFO connection. What we don't see is a UFO hovering over these crop circles, making them There are a couple of scattered cases where people have seen what look like orbs, or even filmed orbs of light or little balls of light moving through a field making these things. So it could be that these are being done by UFOs, but it's just not a super strong connection there. People don't see UFOs hovering over it, putting down a beam of light and flattening and making these circles. So we don't know who's doing it. We know it's not humans. We know that it's an intelligence. And my guess is that this is a sign to us to sort of make us think, to make us wake up, to enlighten us to some way, to start people on a search for what, within themselves and, without, to what could be causing these. And I know there are unusual effects. People have gone inside these crop circles and heard strange noises. They've had instrumentation go haywire. They've had all kinds of stuff happen within these crop circles. There's something to it, for sure. I don't know what it is. This area in England is where most of them appear, but they're all over the world. There's some here in California. In each book I've written on various states, usually there's one or two at least crop circles. So I know that they appear. There's been some circles, similar things, and not just crops, but in ice and other materials. So I'm very interested to see how this all develops, and I really would love to know what intelligence is doing this, and if it is the ETs. But at this point, I don't think that there's a lot of conclusive evidence pointing towards that. We don't know who's doing it. We don't know why. We don't know exactly what they mean, other than they do reflect spiritual principles and scientific principles. So I'm pretty interested in it, but not an expert.
Okay. Who are some researchers that have influenced your work? People you respect in the UFO research field.
This is a great question. No one's ever asked me that. Wow. There are some researchers I don't respect, and I'm not going to name them by name, but they're on my naughty list because I feel like they are disinforming, and they're backpedaling, and I don't trust them. I really don't. But there are some researchers I really respect who have influenced me, absolutely. And probably highest among them would be Jim and Coral Lorenzen. I really loved them as UFO researchers. They were pioneers in this field. Way back in the modern age of UFOs, right when it began, 1947, they were there recording it. They formed the first citizen UFO group, APRO, the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. I love these guys. If not for them, there would probably not be a UFO movement, certainly not where it is today. So they started it, and they are heroes in my mind. J. Allen Hynek, I thought, also a great influence on this field, and certainly influenced me. He was an astronomical consultant for Project Blue Book in the Air Force, and he eventually defected. He went against the party line and would not say that, no, UFOs are not real. He said they're real, and actually ended up writing a couple of books about it, lambasting the Air Force for how they handled the situation, for debunking it, for lying and ridiculing witnesses about a phenomenon they clearly knew was real. Our tax dollars being spent to make us look like fools when they know it's real. Makes me so mad. So he's definitely one of my heroes. Bud Hopkins, absolutely. My favorite researcher probably is Timothy Good. He's an English researcher who's put out a number of really amazing books. I like these guys because they're objective. They don't have an agenda to say, these are our space brothers here to rescue us. Or no, these are evil aliens that are going to take over. Bud Hopkins was a great researcher. But a lot of researchers will refuse to look at the spiritual aspects of a person's experience. Or they don't want to hear about the ghost experiences or the near-death experiences or the psychic experiences people have had following a UFO encounter or prior to it, or Bigfoot UFO encounters, which do happen. They're very rare, but it does happen. So a lot of researchers are a little closed-minded, or they have an agenda, and they're not being objective. I've always striven to be objective and let the witnesses speak for themselves. So yeah, Timothy Good, J. Allen Hynek, Bud Hopkins, Jim and Coral Lorenzen, love those guys. There's others out there. Yvonne Smith, I've worked with her. She's a current researcher here in Southern California. I respect her absolutely. Barbara Lamb, another great researcher. There's a number of really good researchers out there, but we need more. There's not enough. Those are my favorite ones, though.
Okay. Let's see. There was an ex-U.S. naval officer that's claiming that he saw an entrance to a secret alien base in Antarctica. Do you know about that?
I've heard of this, and there's a number of stories like this. Admiral Byrd talked about an entrance into the hollow earth, so to speak. There are a number of stories like this, and what I find interesting about them is, if it's from one person, I'm like, not so impressed. But as the accounts start to mount, one person corroborates another, you start to realize there's something to this. And when someone has credentials, such as, a trained military officer who is, a trained observer and has a lot to go or a lot to lose by putting their reputation and their career on the line by revealing this, that makes me prick my ears up for sure, and pay closer attention.
Yes, I also read where he said that even President Obama was seen visiting at this base.
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking the presidents, most of them at least, have been informed to some level on this, depending. George Bush he headed the CIA at some point. One of the Bushes did, so he was probably in the loop. Clinton, to a certain extent, we know Jimmy Carter said he was going to reveal all the UFO information. He saw a UFO. Reagan saw UFOs and made some really amazing statements about how we would all come together if we realized that there was a alien threat, beyond our planet. So I'm sure that some of these presidents are aware of this. And but I don't know. It's like I said earlier, a schizophrenic situation, because a lot of people in government, senators and representatives and judges and all these people don't have a clue. They have no idea that this is going on, whereas a lot of them do know. They're part of the intelligence committees. They've been informed. And there are people within corporations, the banking industry, the oil companies, Monsanto, and all these huge corporations, the drug companies. They know. They're part of this cover-up. So, it's a tough situation, and I don't know how it's all going to come out, but I am sure that they're monitoring this. I'm sure that there are alien bases on our planet. There's some evidence that it's not just alien bases. And I mentioned earlier that aliens might be working with humans at Area 51, because a number of people have said this. But that's true for Edwards Air Force Base. That's true for Rendlesham, England. Larry Warren and others reported that. So I think we're probably working with the ETs at some capacity, and perhaps this is why presidents are being taken to these bases, or high-level Air Force officers or Navy commanders or what have you. Yeah, I do think they're aware of it at very high levels and are visiting these bases and know all about the ETs and are studying the technology and doing their best to release it to us without destroying, our society.
Have you ever had any disagreements within the UFO community over your research?
No, not really. I don't agree with all researchers, certainly. I've never gotten into a flat-out argument. I've debated some of the demonic believers, and boy, oh boy, yeah, that's about as close as we can get to an argument. And because they won't budge. They've got their faith-based belief that everything paranormal, a ghost of your Aunt Martha, is a demon. Anything paranormal is a demon to these guys. And it's very hard to debate them. They don't listen to reason. And when I start telling them, no, if you look at UFO behavior, it falls under the human umbrella. It would be easier to prove that humans are demonic than it would be ETs. So yeah, I've gotten in some arguments with those guys, and I've argued with some researchers about the contactee era. This is, the 1950s. There was a number of people, mostly men, like George Adamski, Howard Menger, Truman Bethlehem, Daniel Fry, a rocket scientist, by the way, who had friendly encounters with human-looking ETs, or friendly encounters. And there are some researchers who says that is all a hoax, all of it. And I'm like, you are out of your mind. You are prejudiced. You are not objective. So I've had some, not all-out fights by any means, but some good emotional debates, certainly, some tempestuous debates with these people. But yeah, I like debating this subject. I'm a huge believer that we're dealing with biological ETs, but I'm not married to that. It's a theory. I don't know for sure it's true. I'm pretty sure it's true. I think it explains the evidence better than any other theory. I've also had it out with some researchers over another theory who they say, no, it's not ET at all. It's a phenomena that wears different masks, and it influences humanity in different ways, and sometimes appears as fairies in the 1800s, and airships in the 1900s, and in modern times it's aliens. I'm like, well, no, you're making some false assumptions here. I don't think that that's true. So yeah, I've certainly debated, but I think within the UFO community, there's a lot of camaraderie and a lot of respect between researchers who have different theories and who are trying to get this information out, because it's a battle. It's a fight. This is the UFO movement. You're fighting multiple levels of secrecy. Witnesses don't want to talk. The UFOs, they could stop this cover-up instantly. They could prove to humanity overnight that they're real if they would just stay over Phoenix for more than an hour, or New York, or whatever, and end the cover-up. So we're fighting, the ETs who are secretive. We're fighting the witnesses who don't want to talk, and the government who is pouring money into making this subject look ridiculous and keeping evidence out of people's hands. So it's a fight, and UFO researchers are a strong, cohesive community, for the most part, that are trying to get the truth out about this subject. So I'm happy to say that, no, I haven't gotten in any fist fights with people, just a few debates.
Okay. What are your thoughts on the unexplained lights in the background of the NASA moon landing photos? And also, the photos look like they have structures on the moon as well. What's your thoughts on that?
There are alien bases on the moon. I think if you look into it, that's what the evidence shows. And I didn't want to look into it until I'd been a UFO researcher for years and years, and certainly heard about the controversy over, did we ever go to the moon? Are the moon landings faked? Are there UFOs on the moon? And I didn't look into it until I interviewed this gentleman who worked for the Navy as a photographer and was approached by his superiors and said, we're giving you a top secret clearance. You're going on this boat, and we want you to photograph the astronauts when they come back from the moon. And he did. He was put right up next to them, right, when they were released from quarantine, or prior to that even, was the first person to talk to them, actually. And he said that the astronauts were out of their minds, could not believe what they had seen, told him that they were followed to and from the moon, and that there were not only UFOs, live UFOs on the moon, but crashed ones, and the alien bases, and all kinds of alien technology. And this is a great witness, this guy. I interviewed him for a long time. He says he not only talked to the astronauts, he saw their photographs, he developed a bunch of them, and he says he saw these photographs of these objects on the moon. So I'm like, fine, I will look into it. And I did, and I was shocked. I did my homework, and oh my God, there are reports of unusual lights on the moon stretching back to the 1600s. Herschel, a very famous astronomer, one of the first people to actually use a telescope and train it on the moon, saw these things. Lights on the moon. Schroeder, there's craters named after this astronomer. He saw them too. A bunch of major astronomers have seen what's called TLP, transient lunar phenomena. That's a scientific term that people who study the moon use to try and explain these lights as a natural phenomena. Some want to call them earthquake lights, except the moon is not geologically active. It does not have volcanoes, does not have earthquakes. So they can't use that to explain it. Furthermore, these lights sometimes appear in intelligent patterns, in rows or circles or crosses or diamonds. And that's just the beginning. That's just the tip of the iceberg. There are 1,000 reports, more, stretching back hundreds of years of these lights on the moon. And it's not just lights. It's excavations. There are differences in the landscape, in craters and bridges, and there's tracks and all kinds of things. So this is why we went to the moon. It wasn't so much a space race. It was a race to get there first to see what was really up there. And when we got up there, we were followed to and from the moon. It's not just this guy interviewed. It's Chris Kraft. It's Maurice Chatelain. It's Jane. A bunch of people who are NASA insiders are saying the same exact thing, that we were followed to and from the moon, and that when we landed Apollo 13 on the moon, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, they all saw these UFOs. They were not allowed to talk about it publicly, though a number of them have made very strong statements about UFO reality or veracity. All of them came back changed by the experience. Some became very, very deeply spiritual. Edgar Mitchell, he ended up, doing an enormous amount of UFO research. Gordon Cooper, he talked about all kinds of UFOs that he had seen as a pilot, not so much in space, but he saw a film of one landing at Edwards. A number of astronauts have made really amazing statements. And there's been some books put out. George Leonard put out a book called Is There Someone Else on the Moon? There's another book out called We Have Alien Bases on the Moon by Fred Steckling. There's a lot of books out, a lot of researchers who have specialized in this and studying the NASA photos. And the photos are phenomenal. If you look at them, we know there's been NASA insiders who said most of the photos have been airbrushed to remove the UFOs. But early on, a lot of these photographs were released without being airbrushed, and they show all kinds of stuff. So yeah, the evidence is very persuasive that there's something up there. And for that matter, there's a number of contactees, or abductees, both, who have reported being taken to the moon and shown some of this stuff. So, boy, oh boy, that when this comes out, there's some heads are going to roll. Oh boy, this cover-up is worse than even what's going on with the entire UFO situation. NASA is in hot water. They're neck deep in this. Boy, oh boy, when they finally reveal this, it's going to be a lot of really angry people. NASA reporters used to give them the nickname that NASA stands for Never a Straight Answer, because they were caught covering up. Yeah, they were caught lying about this numerous times and giving contradictory statements and backpedaling and all the moon rocks that we've taken from the moon. Well, I could talk for hours about this moon stuff. They haven't released most of them. And a lot of the footage on the moon, they were there for hours and hours and hours. We've not seen it. And it's just, what a travesty. There's stuff up there, no doubt. We're going back to the moon. There are plans to go back within a couple of years, and we're going to Mars. So guess what? It's going to come out. We're going to find out, and this is why I think disclosure is right there on the horizon. Because if we do go to the moon, and if we do go to Mars, it's going to be really, really hard to cover this up continually. So I'm hopeful. And I think there's alien bases on the moon. I do.
Okay. As far as back in ancient times, what, if any, evidence that you know of, like for instance, in caves with the Native American drawings, they've also got, drawings of what looks like flying saucers. What evidence do you know of other than that you can tell us?
Yeah, the cave paintings are phenomenal. There's stuff in every culture across the world that points towards this. In Native American cultures, there's many myths and legends about how the sky people and how this is where people came from. In Egypt, the Sumer, the first civilization, talks about how fish gods came from the sky and taught agriculture and civilization. There's all kinds of hieroglyphics within Egyptian artifacts that show your classic UFO. Ancient India has all kinds of texts talking about vimyanas, they're called, which are flying machines. There's an enormous amount of evidence pointing towards so-called ancient aliens. There's artifacts, stone carvings. There are, my favorite evidences are these paintings stretching back. I think the earliest one is about the thousands, the 11th century. But there's paintings from, 1200, 1300, 1400, throughout the Dark Ages, throughout the Renaissance, by all these various famous painters. And these are paintings anyone can see. They can visit them now, and there is a good dozen of these paintings, usually of some religious event, perhaps, the Virgin Mary or Jesus. And in the background, there is a metallic saucer. Not a circle of light in the sky, a saucer with a dome with little lights around it, or a beam shining down, or landing gear, or a porthole with a figure inside. So it's not ambiguous. It's not even slightly ambiguous. These things are metallic UFOs. There's one shining down a beam of light, and it's striking the Virgin Mary. There's another that has beams of light striking baby Jesus. There's all kinds of these paintings that show what look like gray metallic saucer-shaped objects. So I think that's really impressive evidence. But wherever you look, in whatever culture, and you follow it back, there's all kinds of little clues like this that appear in writings and in artifacts of some kind pointing towards visitations by ancient aliens. However, there's nothing like what's happening today. There's no historical precedent for what we have in terms of these large numbers of sightings going on a daily basis. Yes, there's some wood carvings showing what appear to be waves of sightings back in the 1400s and things like this. But there is no writings that say people are being taken on board and examined, and they're seeing aliens, and they're going to other planets, and UFOs are landing, and day after day, and all this sort of thing. We don't have a whole lot of that. So I think there is evidence of ancient aliens, and it's very impressive evidence, but I'm not sure it is quite escalated to the level of activity we're having today. Could be, but the evidence doesn't show that.
What are your thoughts on the ancient astronaut theory?
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, I think ETs have been around forever, and the fact that some of these guys look just like us really raises grave concerns about who we are and where we came from. And I think a lot of the accounts of perhaps angel visitations or religious miracles, such as the Fatima incident. L.A. Marzulli has done an enormous amount of research on the Fatima incident, which occurred in Portugal in 1913, which is pointing towards not an angelic miracle, but more towards a standard UFO sighting, visitation type thing. So I think, yeah, ancient aliens have been around forever, and only until we started exploding nuclear bombs. This is when the modern age of UFOs began. I think this is what caused the ancient aliens to come roaring towards Earth and take a closer look at what's going on, because that's when activity just flooded in huge, huge numbers and transformed from the so-called ancient aliens to the modern age of UFOs. So it's a continuum. I think it's been going on, and I don't think UFOs are going to go away. Certainly, I think what we're going to see is an escalation of activity trending towards open official contact.
Could you explain SETI and the purpose of it?
Yeah, SETI. I have to laugh when I think of SETI, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence using radio waves. Because these guys who are doing this, it's an interesting scientific study and a great idea, but it hasn't hit a whole lot of pay dirt. There's been a few bleeps or oh wows, like strange signals. But by and large, no. They have not found evidence of ETs, at least that's been publicly revealed. And it's kind of a joke, because here are these guys looking up to outer space, when if they just look down, look at the person right next to them, they'd see that that person is having contact regularly with ETs. They are refusing to examine the evidence that we already have within the public arena. Science becomes almost a closed system, and these guys refuse to look at the evidence. And they think they're being scientific and objective, when in fact they're thinking emotionally. They're making all these false assumptions that UFOs can't be real because the stars are too far away, and there's no such thing as light faster than light travel, as proved by Einstein's equations, which show that the faster you go towards light, the more mass you have, so you would never be able to reach the speed of light because you would have infinite mass. But that apparently is just not true, because these guys are doing it, these UFOs. SETI is, I'm unhappy with it. I don't think we should be wasting our money in that direction. I think that money that we're putting towards SETI should be used to investigate abductee cases or UFO hotspots, and trying to end the cover-up, this sort of thing. There's another group called CSETI, which is the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. That was formed by Stephen Greer, MD. Not SETI, it's a different group, CSETI. And they formed, I was a charter member. He formed groups in a number of states across the U.S. and the world, for that matter. And we go out and we try to call down UFOs. And we're successful, actually, on a number of occasions. And he's filmed them. He's gotten some amazing evidence this way. I think that's the direction we should be going in, and give up this listening with radio waves, because it's not working.
In your opinion, what is the biggest UFO cover-up?
Oh gosh, there's a number of it. I think the biggest is probably, the UFO crashes. I think is where the real pay dirt is, because here we have a situation where we have proof. We have alien technology. We have stuff that could solve the environmental crisis, the energy crisis, the economic crisis. It could cure people of disease. All this incredible stuff. And it is being covered up. And it is our tax dollars that are being used to cover this up. So, yeah, I think this is where the pay dirt is. And what's so ironic is here we have the proof, and yet the actual evidence for UFO crashes in the public arena is not great. All we really have is eyewitness testimony, multiple eyewitness testimony. I mean, in the Roswell incident, there's well over 100 people who have testified. We have tracked that Roswell crash from people who saw it on radar, from people who saw it crash, from people who visited the crash site, from people who guarded the crash site, from people who picked up the wreckage, from people who flew the wreckage, to people who studied the wreckage, to people who studied the bodies, to people who reverse engineered the technology. We've gotten it from beginning to end, interviewing witnesses, and yet it's still not taken seriously. So in my mind, that is where the biggest cover-up is, and it's involving hard evidence of UFOs. When someone has a piece of metal from a UFO or anything, even photographs, this is when the so-called men in black will show up. These are sometimes apparently some form of ETs or sometimes government agents who refuse to say what agency they're from, but will actually take the evidence at gunpoint away from people and threaten to kill you and your family. And people have died over this sort of thing. The Roswell incident is just one example. People were definitely threatened in there, and there were some suspicious deaths as well. So that's where the cover-up is most volatile, I think.
Have you dealt with the men in black yourself?
Not really. No, I mean, there's been a few things that have maybe. I mean, I've had some problems here and there. Let me put it that way. Back in the day when we used to use mail instead of email, I was very active sending out UFO articles and UFO books to publishers. And my mail would come back opened. And I thought, okay, it's a coincidence. But my bills weren't coming back opened, just my manuscripts, my articles. And I thought, well, this is odd. And it just happened so much. I'm like, one day I was with my sister, and I'm going to my mailbox, which was, a locked mailbox. You couldn't get in. Not anybody could get into it except for the postal person. And I'm like, you open my mailbox. You tell me what you think. Is my mail being opened? Because I had such a volume of mail that I was getting, correspondence back and forth on a daily basis. And she opened the mailbox, and she saw my manila envelope there, torn wide open so that it could be read. She's like, wow, someone opened this. I'm like, yeah, they did. So there's that. I've had phone problems. I will be doing interviews. When I was doing interviews for the Topanga Canyon UFO wave, probably my biggest case. I mean, I had contacted the police. I was putting up flyers. I was camping out in the fields at night. I was knocking on doors. I was gung-ho to find out the truth on this incident. And that's when I started to get clicks and buzzes and weird voices on my phone. And it got bad. I mean, I would be interviewing someone, and the witness would say, what's that noise in the background? I'm like, that's not me. Is that you? And they're like, no. And there'd be so much static that I sometimes had to stop doing the interview. So there's that. And now that I've got email, I've been hacked a number of times. I've had a number of computer problems. I don't know if it's beyond the level of the average person, but I wonder. And probably the most outrageous incident occurred again during that Topanga Canyon wave. Still a very young researcher in my early 20s. And this guy calls me up, honest to God, and says, oh, I'm from the Army. I forget what he said. I'm a janneler. I'm involved in intelligence. And I do satellite mapping. And I've been working in all kinds of high-level capacities in secret areas for years and years. And he's going on and on about this. I'm like, why is this guy calling me? Get to the point. He's like, you're Preston Dennett, right? You're the UFO researcher. I'm like, yeah. Do you have a story? Why are you calling me? He says, what he said is, you shouldn't be researching this. What you're doing is dangerous. You have no idea what you're getting into. I'm like, oh, really? What am I getting into? And he kind of, changed the subject and says, well, you're just barking up the wrong tree. There's no pay dirt in it. There's nothing to it. I'm like, well, hold on a second. You just said it was dangerous, and now you're telling me there's nothing to it. I didn't tell him that. I'm like, but I thought to myself, you're contradicting yourself. I'd just recently taken a class in college called Techniques of Persuasion. And he started to go down the list of techniques of persuasion to try to persuade me to stop researching. And he didn't outright threaten me, but he kind of made those veiled threats. And finally, I'm like, okay, is that it? Do you have anything else to say? And he's like, nope, that's it. I'm like, fine, thanks for the call. And I hung up. And I felt not scared, not even remotely. I was ready to die for this subject back then. I mean, I'm still gung-ho about it. I'm not going to give up. I wasn't scared. I was flattered that this guy thought little old me, a bookkeeper, was worth threatening. Perhaps I touched a nerve. I don't know. Perhaps I was getting into sensitive areas. But yeah, I was flattered that maybe he thought I was worth threatening. So that's about it. I've had some weird people, people stop on the street and take a photograph of me once. Before I was, even remotely, I'm not well known. I'm not famous by any means. But occasionally that would happen. Or I'd be at a convention, or I'd be speaking, and there'd be a guy in a suit in the audience, way too dressed up, mirrored sunglasses, perfect CIA hair, and he stands up and starts to debunk my research in the middle of my lecture. And really rude about it, too. I think so that some of these are CIA stooges or government stooges trying to make me look like an idiot. So I haven't been outright attacked. I haven't been really threatened, but I've run into little things like that.
How supportive is your family?
These are such great questions, Melinda. Not a lot of people have asked me that. And initially, they were horrified, except for my brother who saw one, and my sister-in-law who saw one, and my other sister-in-law who had an experience. And, a nephew who saw a UFO. Only the ones who saw stuff were okay with it, but they weren't talking. My father said, oh, my gosh, you should probably go to church. He was not religious at all and had really rebelled against religion and thought that it was because I had not been raised as a religious person that maybe I was weak-minded or something. I don't know. Could never, ever read anything about this subject, would not read any of my books, would refuse to listen to what I had to say about it. My other brother remained skeptical for a very long time until I confronted him and held the evidence in front of his face and said, listen to this police tape. Look at this photograph. There are 3,000 landing trace cases. There's, implant removal cases. There are medical injuries, healings. There's government documents. You have not done your homework. So, yeah, it was a tough haul in the beginning, but I brought them all around. Every one of them now knows this is real. They're not super interested in it. They're a little bit embarrassed sometimes when people ask them, oh, are you Dennett? Is Preston your brother? Because they're a little bit embarrassed by the subject, I think. But they believe it. They know it's real, and they now accept it, and they put up with their crazy brother. I've got 5 brothers and sisters. One's now deceased, but yeah, they've all had to put up with me. And it wasn't easy in the beginning. But now they accept it, and I'm very grateful for their support. And everyone, all my friends, people at work, my bosses have always been supportive. And by and large, most of the people around me have been very supportive, and certainly they are today.
So, Preston, what are your plans for the year? Is there anything that you'd like for our listeners to know that we haven't covered? And do you have a website that the people can go to?
Yeah, I do. My website is if you Google my name, it'll take you there. The actual website address is PrestonDennett.weebly.com. I've got all my books there. I've got excerpts of my books. You can purchase my books through the website or on Amazon or online retailers or bookstores if you can find them. You can also contact me through my website if you have a question or a story to share. I'm still keeping active this year. I'm interviewing all kinds of people. I'm putting out 2 books this year. One is going to be about undersea UFO activity off the California coast. Another is going to continue my series of books, Not From Here, which are various articles I've written over the years. And I'm also speaking in various locations. Most recently, I'll be speaking up at UFOCon in San Francisco on the weekend of March 24th to 26th. And I'll be speaking about my latest book there. I have an amazing slide presentation, so I'm super excited about it. Keeping busy and thanks so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we want to thank you for coming on the show. We really enjoyed talking to you. We would love to have you come back anytime. Rod, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Well, I've been listening, and there's a whole lot of I'd like to jump into with you, but I gotta be better on my toes. I'm kind of beat down right now. But Preston, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I appreciate Melinda doing such a great job hosting tonight and taking care of it.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, I'd definitely love to come back. My latest book is going to be out in a few months. I'll let you know when it comes out, and maybe we can do this again.
All right, that sounds great, bud. Well, we're going to call it a night, and you have, like I said, thank you for coming on the show. You have a good night and a great upcoming weekend, and don't, be careful, duck out there.
Thanks very much. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks very much.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Now, let's see what we're going to play here to close us up tonight. What do you want to listen to? How about Major Tom?
Okay.
I think that'd be good with the topic y'all talking about tonight.
Standing there alone, the ship is waiting, all systems are go. Are you sure? Control is not convinced, but the computer has the evidence. No need to abort. The countdown starts. Watching in a trance, the crew is certain, nothing left to chance. All is working, trying to relax. Up in the capsule, plenty of a drink. Jokes, Major Tom. The count goes on. 4, 3, 2, 1. far beneath the shore.